Carl Icahn owns more than $1.5 billion worth of Occidental stock, says the deal's too risky and too expensive. Mr. Icahn joins us now on the phone in a CNBC exclusive interview. Carl, welcome back to Halftime. It's been a while. It's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Scott.
So I have, Carl, the press release in front of me, which literally dropped, within the hour before our program. Occidental completes the acquisition of Anadarko. It seems like the ship has sailed on this, and you knew it was going to be a long shot, I take it. What do you do now?
Well, Scott, we are certainly going to you can't fight this deal, and we said that right at the start, but I think this deal is one of the worst I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of stuff that has gone on over the many years that we've been involved. You take a look at Oxy, and you take a look at Vicky Halbert, who says that she's done a great job and interested in the long-term benefits to the company. Since she came in as CEO on May 2nd, 2016, the value of Occidental has dropped $23.7 billion, down 41% under her stewardship. While the XLE, which is, a comp to them, a comp to Oxy, the big oil companies, have only dropped 14%. And more interestingly, since she announced this deal, or not that she announced it, I think David Faber broke it, I believe, around April 11th, the stock has gone down $16 billion. Now, what does that tell you? And the company had promised, they promised the shareholders that they would maintain a prudent balance sheet and not take undue risks. Now, what the heck do you call this? And even worse, not only do they break that promise or break that commitment, but they wiggle out of having to have its shareholders vote their vote, because normally you would need 20% of the shareholder vote to be able to do a transformational transaction like this. So they blatantly ignore, and this has been a history of Occidental, they blatantly ignore shareholders. Shareholders are a nuisance to them. And it's time that we hold them accountable. I mean, if the board had done this, or in a family-owned company, they not only would be fired, but they would be sued. And so it's time that you make them accountable. Now, look, they go in and say, hey, look, we have this deal that we must do, and Icahn's going to be disruptive. Now, I have never been disruptive in companies where companies do a good job. I mean, it doesn't serve my purposes to be disruptive. I believe in not micromanaging. But there are two things that you have to do in this company. You have to make sure that we have board representation to keep it from doing another blatantly stupid act like this.
Let me ask you, because there's a lot in that answer, Carl. There's,
Okay.
You mentioned the performance versus the XLE. There are those who say a better representation of how the stock has performed is looking at it versus the XOP. And what oil's been doing recently. It's been a mess. The stocks have been a mess. And if you look over the more recent history, it hasn't performed as badly as, say, the broader market has. In some cases, over whatever time period you may be looking at, it's performed a little bit better. It's been a tough environment.
Well, hold on, Scott. I'd just like to disagree with you respectfully with what you just said. This company promised its shareholders they were going to be prudent. They're a large company. Their comps are Chevron, Exxon, Shell. Those are the comps to this company. Those are the comps they want to be believed they're comparable to. And if you look at those comps have not done badly. And by the way, Oxy might not have done badly if she didn't make one mistake after another. And under Chaser, the CEO before her, they were doing pretty good. I mean, she took a company that was way up, and she, I think, has helped to destroy it. Now, I'm not going to go and argue about her competence as an engineer. And therefore, I'm not going to in any way try to micromanage this company, nor do I micromanage most of the companies we've been involved with. And I think our model has worked. I mean, I don't have to really defend my model. I mean, if you look at the hundreds of companies we've been in, shareholders have benefited by over $1 trillion by, I think, partially by our being involved, or good partially that we've been involved. So I'm not going to apologize for that. But you tell me why they refuse to put us on the board. If we're on the board, we are going to see that something like this does not occur again without a board vote, without a shareholder vote.
Right. Well, the reason they say...
let me just finish.
Okay.
Let me just finish because this is important.
Okay.
Also, we believe that the reason they did this was to keep the shareholders from knowing that there was another suitor around. That's what I believe. And if there is another suitor around, I want the shareholders to see an offer made by that suitor rather than hide it under the rug, which I'm sure this board will do. Because this board has not acted in the best interest of shareholders. That's as simple as that.
So you asked why won't they put your folks on the board? They say that they're not qualified. That's number one. And the reason why you didn't get the shareholder vote was, in what really sticks in your craw about this whole thing, is the Buffett deal that the company made with him, $10 billion, and they gave him warrants in response of that. And you've criticized that heavily. Well,
wait a minute. That's absurd. They didn't have to give Warren. I mean, Warren did a great job for himself at Berkshire. You respect that, but they didn't have to give him $1.5 billion gift. They just went out to raise $15 billion yesterday, the day before. $15 billion was oversubscribed, but with $75 billion. So they could have easily got that money anyway. She just rushed out in a panic. She admits that she has no experience in M&A, so what the hell is she doing?
Well,
running an M&A process?
Maybe she would say that maybe she's an operator. She focuses on the operation, not
okay, great. Well,
she's not a banker.
But she ran to Omaha to make this deal with Buffett in 90 minutes. Buffett did the deal. Usually Buffett goes with Charlie Munger before he did a deal. He didn't even bother on this one. He just did the deal in 90 minutes. So, the whole thing is a travesty.
You intimated in either an interview or a letter that you knew of somebody who would give the financing without the warrants. Who was that?
Well, I'm not going to divulge that, but I definitely knew of somebody. Okay, and I will divulge it. I would have done it. So as simple as that.
Okay. That makes it more convincing.
Yeah, that's convincing.
Did you make any kind of offer?
I didn't know about it. It was a secret. She ran, well, at least to me. She's not going to call me anyway, obviously. I don't think I'm on her favorite list. I'm not going there for Christmas dinner to Galveston. But, I would say that she definitely could have gone out. I have to tell you something, Scott. In all the deals I've done, and this is really truthful, and I'm saying this 100%. In every deal I've done, I've always found in talking to people, or my proxy solicitors would tell me, they'd talk to people, oh, they disagree with you, Carl. They say, oh, this company isn't doing bad, that, the chairman's good, the CEO's good. They just think you're wrong. I have never spoken to this one, nor has my proxy solicitor talked to anybody that's not enraged by what they've done. Okay, everybody agrees with what we said, that this was blatant abrogation of fiduciary duty. And I hope we were going to find out more when we get that 320 request agreed to.
Let me ask you this about the Buffett thing, which we discussed. Here's what I want to understand, okay? The Buffett deal was announced on April 30th. I looked at your filing, and I have it right in front of me. I'm holding it up. I'm looking at it. You started to buy the stock on May 2nd. So the Buffett news had gone public on April 30th. So you knew about Buffett being in, and then you started buying the stock. If you were so against what the company did with Buffett, why did you start buying the stock once that news had already been made public?
Hey, Scott, you of all people know my modus operandi. I buy things when they go down. The stock, take a look at it. I bought the stock when it went down. Obviously, it went down more. So we're losing money on it at this point, but that's happened to me many times. We buy. You just look at our history. We just bought Caesars. It was down, what, 40% when I bought it. So why did I buy Caesars if I didn't think it was, if I didn't like the way it was being managed?
Well, I'm wondering if you
but by the way, Caesars has, I applaud the board for listening and doing the right thing as far as working to deal with El Dorado. I think they acted very responsibly. Jim Hunt did a great job as chairman in listening to what we were saying. Not only listening, but deciding, weighing the differences. Here, you really just can't even talk to these people. And everyone sort of, which is funny, everyone agrees with what we're saying. But when you ask why I bought the stock, that's a surprising question for you.
Well, I mean,
the stock went way down, so I bought it.
Right. I mean,
because I honestly believed that something might go wrong with that deal because it was so ridiculous deal for a company like Occidental to take on and spend the extra billions they had to pay to do it. In fact, if they really had any desire to do this deal, what did they have, an epiphany on April 12th? Why the hell didn't they go in 2, 3, 4 months before? Now, they'll say that Walker over at Anadarko didn't want anything to do with Vicky, and therefore he didn't want her in his stock. He didn't want to take a stock. That's their reasoning, that they wouldn't talk to them.
I guess part two of my question, and you'll understand, I think, better as to why I asked it the way I did, is that whether you thought that, look, the market made its initial judgment on the Buffett part of the deal. The stock went down. You're not the only person who criticized that, including our own Jim Cramer. So I get it. Part two of my question, though, which I hope sheds light on the reason why I even bring it up, is I'm wondering whether you thought Chevron maybe would come back at a higher bid or somebody else would come in at that moment and try and top Occidental. Well,
that certainly occurred to me. Or did I think that possibly, that the deal, that the board would act more responsibly in keeping Vicky and the chairman from doing this? And I blame Batchelder, who has a lot of power on that board, I understand, for allowing this to happen. A board is supposed to keep a runaway CEO intact. And what we have here is a runaway board and a runaway CEO. Now, being that said, I'm not going to go macromanage. If we put up people on the board, all we care about, we're not going to tell them how to do this damn Anadarko merger. That's done. And they certainly know how to do it a lot better than any of us could even think about doing it as far as putting it together. And that's why we made trillions of dollars for shareholders, at least $1 trillion for shareholders over the years. We don't go in and presume to know what we don't know. So we're not going to get in any way involved in being distracted. But we want to be sure of two things. One, they don't do another stupid deal without our say and without the shareholders getting to see it. And two, if somebody does want to buy this company, it doesn't get brushed under the rug because all these because I believe these board members just like their jobs. I mean, I'll just say it bluntly. Hey, maybe you can't blame them. You've got a bunch of board members here. I don't think any of them, or very few of them, have oil experience. And you just have them there. And what the heck? They got a cushy job. And so does Schaefer Matters. I mean, she makes in $240,000 a week or some crazy number like that. So, she makes in 1 week what the median shareholder at Occidental makes in 2 years. I mean, the whole system is crazy. That's why you have a wealth gap. And I wouldn't mind her getting paid if the shareholders made a lot of money.
Let me ask you this. Your track record, obviously, and your results speak for themselves. Let's wrap up this part of the conversation with my last question. Is you want 4 board seats? Would you think that you could come to any kind of an agreement with the company? Would you take 1 board seat? Do you think you can get 1?
Okay, come on, Scott. You know me better than that. I'm not going to negotiate on CNBC on this. Come on.
Don't fault me for asking you, Carl.
Hey, Scott, you want to be an investment banker? Come down to Wall Street and be an investment banker. I mean, we're not going to negotiate on CNBC.
Okay. So don't fault me for trying.
Okay, I can't fault you for trying. You always try, and I admire for it.
All right, I appreciate that. Let me ask you more broadly. So what do you make of the market? Oil's been getting, as I said, destroyed. Some of these stocks have been getting hammered, too. Just what do you make of that? and then we can get into the broader market. Because you have other oil exposure. You've played in those stocks over the years. What do you think of it?
Well, you get cycles, and things look terrible, and the storm is there, and the hurricane, and the wind is blowing, and things to turn around. But I am not telling you I'm bullish on the market at all. I think that we do have a lot of problems in this market. I mean, you really have a situation where the market's buoyed for reasons that don't relate to value, meaning you get low interest rates. People have nowhere to put their money. Money flows into index funds and whatever, and it just keeps going until it stops going. So I'm not going to tell you that I'm bullish, but these things have cycles. The energy companies, I mean, people aren't going to stop using oil. I mean, if you get a recession, maybe they'll be less used, but then again, you got the problem with Iran, you got the problem with Venezuela. You have some discipline with Saudi Arabia and OPEC. I mean, I personally won't say that, but it's sort of interesting now that you mentioned oil pricing going down. How does this board and Vicky have the temerity to risk the company, literally risk the dividends for certain, and even a bet like this when they don't have a balance sheet to back it up? I mean, a Chevron could do it, an Exxon could do it, but it's really blatantly ridiculous to be doing the deal that she did here, and to say that there shouldn't be accountability is really an absurdity. I mean, in the Army, if she did something like this, they court-martial.
What do you think the job the Fed's done?
Hey, look, I think the Fed's got a lot of different pressures on it. I honestly think...
Including ones from the president.
Yeah, and look, I'm not going to get into politics or anything like that, but I think that lowering the rates is just like, you have a bad headache and you take the aspirin, the headache doesn't go away maybe. Or maybe you have something worse and you take it. In other words, I don't think just lowering rates is the answer, the end-all answer. If it was that easy, you would never have these cycles. And you do have it in a capitalistic system. You have these cycles. I do think that there's risk in what's going on, and certainly with China, certainly here and there. I think you really have to settle the China problem. You have to really see that, because the China problem is not going to just have repercussions for us. It has repercussions throughout the world. And I'm not going to get into the politics of it, and I certainly understand the reasons behind doing it. But on the other hand, there were reasons, strong reasons to settle it.
But are you saying do you disagree with the president and Larry Kudlow and Peter Navarro, who suggest that the Fed needs to continue cutting rates?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to get into politics. I would say that there's an argument for cutting rates. But you look at Europe, I mean, they cut the rates to negative, and look at the economy over there. So I don't think that's the final answer to the problem.
How do you think the trade war is going to play out?
Look, I hope it's settled, and I think, and I put it this way, I have every hope that they'll make a deal and get that settled sooner than later. And I certainly think, well, I don't get into politics at all, and I know I have enough to do, so I don't get to Washington. But I think Donald would certainly, like to see it settled, and I have hope that it will be. And I think it's very important to settle it one way or another. And look, China has reasons to settle it too. I mean, it's not just a one-way street here. I mean, so I just think when two great powers want to get something done, they'll figure out a way to do it. But I'm not the expert on that. Ask me about the market. Hey, by the way, ask me about the market, and it's one period for me where usually you have an opinion and you figure it out and you have a strong opinion. I have no opinion now on this market because there's so many variables hitting you, and it's so strange right now that. So ask me about some of the stocks I do. I have an opinion on it.
I'm going to do that. You're not the only one. You're not the only one who's told me that recently as well.
Okay.
Other big-time investors who sort of throwing up their hands trying to figure out exactly what's going on. It hasn't been the easiest environment. So you said it, so I'm going to do it. What are your intentions in Cloudera? You have a big stake there.
Well, I think it's a very undervalued company, obviously, or I wouldn't be buying it. I think, going at 1.5 times revenue for a company like that, I think it's very attractive. And there's another one when you ask me, well, why did you buy it? If you think the company is sort of, shall we say, not done the best job on this merger they just did, and they have to, obviously, they have an interim CEO now. So that's a perfect one of the one I bought. And I think even with Oxy, if you could put a muzzle on management and the board and make it more realistic, I think Oxy's undervalued. But if they keep going this way, we're going to have a problem there.
Well, have you spoken with the management of Cloudera yet? Do you want board seats there?
Well, we spoke very briefly, and I certainly never asked for anything. We just talked. I just called them up to say that I was fine on a 13-day.
How'd that go over?
Well, no, it wasn't bad. I mean, we spoke for a few minutes and said we would speak again. That's the normal, thing. And I think that Cloudera is undervalued, but obviously I think that.
Are you buying any other stocks?
Well, yeah, there are a few, but I don't really want to talk about them at this time. I'd like to keep it in being an activist. So it's certainly an interesting time. I think there's certainly some very interesting opportunities, but you have to worry about a full-scale recession. So you have both of these things weighing on you, and it's one time that unusual for me that I don't have a real feeling either way on the market, but it's hard to keep hedged. You have the hedge, you lose on the hedge, you lose on the other side. You really. So I just like the model I do, where you're an activist, and usually, as you've seen in the past, they work out.
Yeah,
not always. Yeah.
But more so than not, or we wouldn't be having this conversation, I suppose, right, Carl?
Yeah, you would, right. You wouldn't be interested in talking to me, and I wouldn't have the money to buy Oxy, right?
There you go. I'm going to let you run. It's been good catching up with you again. I appreciate your time very much.
Okay, good talking to you, Scott.
All right, you as well. That's Carl Icahn, the billionaire activist investor, joining us there, the chairman of Icahn Enterprises.